Right after my daughter left on a business trip, leaving me with my supposedly completely paralyzed grandson, my world turned upside down. I had just closed the door behind her and was already heading to the kitchen when I heard a rustling sound behind me. I turned around, and my breath caught in my throat. Kyle, my 12-year-old grandson, who for months had not been able to move either an arm or a leg, slowly rose from his wheelchair, placed his feet on the floor, and stood confidently in front of me. "Grandpa," he said quietly but very clearly, "Mom wants to hurt you." I stared at him like I was seeing a ghost. In front of me was a child I had believed for half a year was severely disabled. A child for whom I had remodeled the first floor of my house, bought a special bed, lifts, a wheelchair, handrails. A child I tucked in every night, smoothing his motionless hands. And now he was standing on his own feet, looking me straight in the face. In that moment, I understood one simple and terrifying thing. All those months, I had been living inside someone else's performance, where my daughter played the role of a loving daughter, and I played the trusting aging father. The set, the tears, the coffee in the mornings, all of it had been part of someone else's script. Ahead of me was a choice that still makes my insides go cold. Hand my own daughter over to the police, or close my eyes and let her keep walking beside me, smiling and waiting for the right moment. But to understand how I got to that morning, we need to rewind about 6 months. My name is Bernard Harrison, and at the time I was 68 years old. Before that fall evening, I had spent years living with the weight of one thought. Yes, I had judged a man correctly, but I had paid for being right with my own daughter and grandson whom I barely knew. About 13 years earlier, my only daughter, Nicole, came to me with news. She was in her early 20s, standing in the middle of my office, nervously twisting the hem of her dress, and finally exhaled, "Dad, I'm pregnant, and Eric and I are getting married." Eric Dalton, that same fiancé, came to my house for dinner. I watched him carefully, not as an anxious father, but as a man who had spent his whole life making money by reading people. I had built a hotel chain from the ground up, valued at around $120 million, and I had never stayed afloat by accident. The smile was too polished, the compliments too rehearsed. He interrupted Nicole almost gently, but in a way that always made sure the last word stayed with him. And when he thought nobody was looking, his eyes turned cold and heavy, like a man calculating how much he could get out of you. After they left, I took out my phone. Over the years in business, I had kept people around who could tell me more about a person in a couple of days than he himself was ready to admit. The puzzle came together fast. It turned out Eric had been fired twice for aggressive behavior, had old debts and a history of gambling, and that an ex-girlfriend had filed a police report against him, then later withdrawn it. I called Nicole and asked her to come over. "Nicole," I said, "this man is dangerous. I checked him out. This isn't a father's jealousy. These are facts. Don't marry him." I spoke harshly, maybe too harshly. She listened in silence, and then her eyes filled with tears. "You've never approved of anyone in your life," she said through those tears. "He's different, Dad. People change. He loves me and our baby." The conversation turned into shouting. She accused me of being used to controlling everyone around me. Maybe in some ways she was right. But about Eric, I was not wrong. She married him anyway. A few weeks later, they moved to another state. Before leaving, she stood in the doorway and said, "Dad, please don't call. Don't interfere." This is my family, my life. After that came long years of almost complete silence. Sometimes a short holiday message. No real conversations, no pictures of my grandson, just one blurry photo. I grew older, the house grew emptier, and somewhere out there a boy was growing up whom I had never even seen once. And all that time I lived with a double thought. On the one hand, I had been right about that man. On the other, what if he really had changed, and I had simply lost my daughter and grandson because I couldn't keep quiet? And then, that evening, with rain pouring outside, I had just finished dinner and was getting ready to clear the table when my phone lit up with an unknown number. Something inside me jolted. Answer it. Hello? At first, there was only heavy breathing on the other end, and then I heard a voice I had not properly heard in years. Dad. My throat went dry. Nicole, what happened? You were right, she barely managed to whisper, and then she cried the way grown women cry, not little girls. You were right about Eric. About everything. I'm scared. Please help me. The words came pouring out. Eric had turned out to be exactly the man I had warned her about. He had been hitting her for years, and she had hidden the bruises, told no one because she didn't want to hear, "We told you so." A couple of days earlier, he had snapped so badly that he hit not only her, but their son too. After that night, Kyle stopped walking. He simply never got up from the floor again. The doctors were talking about severe damage, saying he might never stand again. She whispered all this into the phone while I sat there clutching the edge of the table. I left him, she said, but I have nowhere to go. Dad, I know this is my fault, but right now there's no one else I can turn to. Listening to it was like drinking acid. I had been right about Eric, but that truth did not make it easier in the slightest, because the price of it was a broken child. I stood up and said it sharply, because in moments like that, pity only gets in the way. Listen carefully. Pack your things, take your documents, yours and Kyle's. Everything else doesn't matter. I'm wiring money for tickets right now, and I'll meet you here. Dad, you really... After everything... I was angry at you for many years, I said honestly. But you're my daughter. Kyle is my grandson. The house is big. Just come. I hung up and started moving. I transferred money for the tickets, arranged for someone to get them to the airport, then called companies that supplied medical equipment, an adjustable bed, a lift, a wheelchair, bathroom handrails. My hands were shaking, not from age, but from a mix of relief and heavy guilt. Yes, I had been right. But if I had spoken more gently back then, if I hadn't forced her into a choice, would she have left? Would she have stayed closer? Those thoughts did nothing to make it easier. A couple of days later, I was standing at the gates of my house. A taxi slowly pulled into the driveway. Nicole got out first. I recognized her immediately, even though her face had gained a deep tiredness. She had lost a lot of weight. There were shadows under her eyes, and her shoulders had that hunched look of someone worn down. But her eyes were the same, only now there was no resentment in them, just confusion and vulnerability. Then I saw him. The driver carefully pulled a wheelchair out of the car. Sitting in it was a boy, my grandson. I slowly walked down the steps. Kyle was small for his age, his shoulders slumped forward, his head tilted to one side against a soft support. His hands lay lifeless in his lap, thin, much too pale for a child, but his eyes, dark, alive, attentive, followed every step I took. There was more life in them than in the rest of his body. Dad! Nicole's voice snapped me out of it. She stood nearby, covering her face with her hands. Only then did I notice the yellowish-blue mark of an old bruise under her left eye. She held her right arm carefully, the way people protect an injured spot. I opened my arms and she practically collapsed into them, pressed her forehead into my chest and burst into tears. It's okay. It's okay, I said quietly. You're home. Both of you are home. No one will touch you here. Then Nicole wiped her eyes and said, Dad, meet Kyle. I crouched down so I could be at his level. Up close, I saw freckles across the bridge of his nose, black hair falling over his forehead, and a gaze far too old for a 12-year-old. Hi, Kyle, I said, feeling my voice go rough. I've been waiting a very long time for us to meet. He couldn't answer, not nod, not smile. But his eyes never left mine. I gently took his hand, cold, completely lifeless. "I'm glad you're here. I'm going to take care of both of you. I promise." Inside the house, I showed them their rooms. Nicole's, a guest room on the second floor overlooking the small garden. Kyle's, a first-floor room with an adjustable bed, an overhead lift, and an accessible bathroom. "Dad, this is too much," Nicole's voice trembled. "You have to start somewhere," I answered shortly. That evening, we ate in silence. Nicole fed Kyle carefully and patiently. Later, I found myself in the hallway outside his room. The door was cracked open, and warm nightlight glowed from inside. Nicole was quietly singing an old lullaby, the same one I used to hum to her when she was afraid of thunderstorms. Her voice carried everything: guilt, love, desperation. I stood there in the dim hallway and felt something spread through my chest that I had not felt in a very long time, the feeling of a living home where someone walks around, cooks something, sings a child to sleep. In the first few weeks, Nicole settled in as if she had always lived there. She got up early, made breakfast, checked whether I had taken my blood pressure pills. She took care of Kyle, washed him, fed him, did the exercises the clinic had shown her. During the day, she called hospitals, pushed for referrals, booked consultations, argued with front desk staff, firmly but without being rude. In the evenings, she read to Kyle out loud from an old, worn book of fairy tales, the same one I used to read to her from. Sometimes I caught myself standing in the hallway outside the half-open door, just listening to her tired, gentle voice. About 2 weeks after they arrived, I woke up to a smell I first thought I had dreamed. Fresh batter, vanilla, sizzling butter, and coffee brewed the right way. In the kitchen, Nicole stood at the stove in my old apron, flipping thin blueberry pancakes. On the table was already a plate stacked high with finished ones, butter beside it, jam, juice, 3 cups. 3 plates, 3 sets of silverware. A house that had spent years living in one mug, one plate mode had suddenly remembered that there could be more than one person in it. "Good morning, Dad." She turned and smiled, simple and warm, without any edge. "I hope you still remember what a real breakfast smells like." "That's not something you forget," I said, feeling something tighten inside me. The last time that smell had filled this house was when Margaret was still alive. Her name was Gloria Andrews. She was around 50, sturdy, neat, with an open face and attentive eyes. We found her through a recommendation. Gloria came by several times a week, helping Nicole with Kyle, lifting him the right way, turning him so he wouldn't get pressure sores, doing light massage, monitoring his breathing, working through exercises. She talked to the boy as if he could answer, told him stories, and I could see that her presence let Nicole breathe a little. "Your daughter is remarkably patient with him," Gloria said to me one day as we stood by the window, watching Nicole carefully adjust the blanket over Kyle's knees. Not every mother can handle this kind of routine. A lot of them break down. She's holding on, calm, practical. I nodded and felt a long-forgotten feeling, something close to pride. In the evenings, the house filled with familiar sounds. The washing machine, the quiet hiss of the stove, Nicole's laughter in the hallway. Sometimes I would pass by Kyle and catch his dark, intent stare on me. He didn't say a word, didn't move a hand or a foot, but with his eyes he tracked everything happening around him. The feeling of a watching child was almost tangible, though at the time, I still didn't understand how important that was. One morning, Nicole peeked into my office with a tray, coffee, a sandwich, a glass of water. I was sitting over reports from the management company and rereading the same paragraph for the 3rd time. "Dad, can I?" She carefully set the tray down and sat across from me, on the edge of the chair, the way she used to in childhood when she wanted to ask for something serious. "You've already done so much. You took us in, provided the house, Gloria, the medications. I don't want to just keep taking. Give me part of the work. Anything at all." I looked at her more closely. There was no old defiance in those words. There was a desire to prove that she hadn't come back only for her father's protection, but that she was ready to take responsibility too. "And what are you suggesting?" "The simplest things. Sort the mail, organize paperwork, review standard contracts, pull together the basic numbers. We're both home anyway right now. It'll make things easier for both of us." Honestly, the idea had been in my head for a while. The hotel chain had grown. Each property needed attention, and I had been thinking about stepping back from operational matters. There was, of course, a shadow of doubt. Our old conflict, the years of silence. But I saw how she had been taking care of Kyle these past weeks, getting up at night if he felt bad, and I understood. In front of me was no longer the girl who slammed doors, but a woman life had battered hard and taught a few things too. "All right," I said. "I really could use the help." In her eyes flashed an almost childlike joy. "Really? As serious as it gets?" That same day, we went up to the office as two people setting up a working process. I opened the cabinets, showed her the folders for each property, explained which manager was responsible for what, which contracts needed special attention. Nicole didn't just nod. She asked questions, made notes in careful handwriting that looked so much like her mother's. Then, I led her to the metal cabinet in the corner. That was where the most important things were kept. Original major contracts, financial reports, property documents. A very limited circle of people knew what it contained. I opened it, took her hand, and placed the ring of keys in it. "This is your responsibility now, too. Open it only for work. Only you or me. Don't give these to anyone else." She closed her fingers around the metal, as if she were holding not just keys, but something much bigger. "Dad, thank you for trusting me." That same night, I couldn't fall asleep for a long time. In my head, pieces of the weeks we had spent together kept turning over. Nicole, laughing in the kitchen. Gloria confidently lifting Kyle while explaining every move to him. Kyle himself staring at me from under his brows without blinking. The house, which for years had felt like a museum, everything in its place, clean but cold, had started breathing again. There was movement now, forgotten mugs on the table, doors closing softly. And woven into this new life was something I had wanted for a long time, but had been afraid to admit to myself. The chance to step away from the endless chase after numbers and become not just the owner of a hotel chain, but a grandfather and a father. If I had known then what my trust would lead to, a lot would have been different. But at the time, I simply lay there, listening to the rain, thinking that life had given me a second chance. New Year's passed quietly. Nicole cooked roasted chicken with potatoes, and on the table stood a bottle of champagne I barely touched. Kyle lay half reclined in his chair under a blanket. I thought this was rock bottom, the place from which we would start climbing back up. I still didn't know that the real descent was only beginning. At first, I blamed it all on fatigue. But around the middle of January, I started noticing strange sensations. One morning, as I was coming down the stairs, the world suddenly shifted under my feet. The steps seemed to sway, my vision blurred. I grabbed the railing and stood there motionless for a minute or two until it passed. These episodes started happening more often. Sometimes I would come to in the middle of a room and not remember what I had been looking for. Sometimes I would read the same paragraph for the third time. Sometimes a simple word would sit right on the tip of my tongue, and I still couldn't say it. Along with the dizziness came a thick, dragging exhaustion, like walking through chest-deep water. Getting from the bedroom to the kitchen started feeling like a small act of heroism. Nicole noticed. "Dad," she said over breakfast, after I asked for the third time what time Gloria was coming, even though we had just talked about it. "You're forgetting things you never used to forget. It's time to see a doctor." "At my age, nothing feels right anymore," I tried to joke. She didn't buy it. "If you don't make the appointment yourself, I'm calling your doctor tomorrow." "You pulled us out of hell, and now you don't want to take care of yourself." "That's not fair, at least not to Kyle." That one hit home. I could say whatever I wanted about myself, but not about my grandson. I called my doctor, Dr. Reynolds, whom I had known for about 20 years. He had seen me in every condition, through the years of sleepless nights, torn between construction sites and loans, and when we were treating Margaret, and later through the insomnia and blood pressure issues. The next day, Nicole drove me to the clinic. I told him about the dizziness, the forgetfulness, the blank spots in my head, the exhaustion that didn't go away even after sleep. He ordered tests. Nicole drove me from office to office, sat outside the doors. To be honest, I was scared. Not of pain and not of surgery. I was afraid they would tell me I had some disease that would slowly take my mind away, and I had only just gotten my daughter and grandson back. The answers came a week later. Dr. Reynolds flipped through the folder of printouts, frowning. "I've got strange news for you," he finally said. "Your blood work looks pretty decent. Blood sugar is normal. Liver and kidneys are fine. Your head scans are clean. No strokes, no tumors. Nothing on the imaging suggests dementia. Honestly, your memory for your age is pretty good." I felt a mix of relief and irritation. When you feel awful and the doctor tells you that on paper you're fine, you start to feel like a fraud. Then why do I feel so bad? You lived through your wife's death, hard years in business. Now you've had stress dropped on you with your daughter, your grandson, caregiving, all these worries, and on top of that, you're still carrying a major business structure on your shoulders. At some point, the body says enough, and this is what you get. Dizziness, fatigue, mental lapses. My advice, reduce your workload, sleep more, stress less, take walks. If it gets worse, we'll dig deeper. I walked out feeling like a man who had come expecting a sentence and instead had been told, more or less still alive, we'll see. That evening I told Nicole everything. She listened carefully, brought me tea, and said firmly, "Then this is exactly the time to listen. I'll help with the work. You'll rest. And don't act like none of this gets to you. Kyle and I need a living father and grandfather, not a hero." She put her hand on my shoulder. I covered it with mine, and I honestly thought, what an amazing grown-up daughter I have. Starting the next morning, a new ritual took shape. I would wake up and soon hear footsteps. The door would open softly, and Nicole would come in carrying a tray. Coffee just the right strength, 2 sugars, sometimes toast. "Good morning, Dad. Stay in bed a little longer. Breakfast in bed is practically a resort." It felt unusual to me, but I didn't want to argue. I would take the mug, drink a couple of sips, feel the heat spread through my chest, and think, getting old isn't so bad if this is how your mornings begin. And then, about half an hour later, the now familiar fog would start in my head, a slight tremor in my hands, weakness. I chalked it up to just having woken up. But one day I woke up on my own, earlier than usual, while the house was still asleep. And to my surprise, I realized I felt better than usual. My head was clear. The cotton I had been pushing through lately was gone somewhere. My thoughts moved evenly. My hands weren't shaking. I got up, walked to the window. My knees tingled. But that was years, not illness. And at that moment, I heard footsteps in the hall. Nicole came in with the tray. "Oh, you're already awake. I thought I'd let you sleep longer." "Just woke up early for some reason," I answered. She set the tray on the nightstand. "Here's your coffee. Drink it while it's hot. I'm going downstairs to Kyle." She left, and I stayed there staring at the mug. The coffee smelled as good as always. But suddenly something inside me tightened. I reached out, almost took the mug, and stopped. I sat there for a minute, then carefully moved the tray aside so that when she came back it would look like I had drunk some. And I decided to just watch how the day went without my morning coffee. The day went on as usual. By midday, I suddenly caught myself realizing that for several hours, I hadn't once grabbed the back of a chair because of dizziness, hadn't forgotten a single phone call, and on the stairs, I held the railing out of habit, not fear. And the tremor in my hands had barely shown up. I just slept well, I tried to reassure myself. The next morning, the same thing happened again. I woke up before her footsteps, and again I felt clear-headed. Nicole brought the coffee. Again, I didn't touch it, and the second day went noticeably easier than the past few weeks had. That evening, I sat by the fireplace trying not to think about what I was thinking. A thought kept creeping up on me, one that made me feel ashamed and cold at the same time. What if the source of my condition wasn't stress or age, but that very mug my daughter brought me every morning? Right away, a wave of resistance rose inside me. Are you out of your mind? A girl who dropped everything and came back, who sits by her son's bed at night, who hasn't said one harsh word to you in all these months. To drive the thought away, the next day I deliberately drank the coffee almost in one gulp. That day became one of the hardest I had had in a long time. My head rang, my heart seemed to stop and then pound, and I couldn't hold a thought in one place for longer than a minute. I called Dr. Reynolds. "Don't take this as nonsense," I said, "but I need my blood checked for foreign substances. Pills, something that shouldn't be there. I understand how this sounds." There was a pause on the other end. "Do you think someone is poisoning you?" he asked, without judgment, just clarifying. "I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but given the family history, I have reason to be cautious." "Come in. We'll see what can be done." The answer came a few days later. Nothing suspicious. Traces of my prescribed medications, my blood pressure pills, and that was it. No foreign substances. I thanked him and felt ashamed that I had allowed myself to even think such a thing. That evening, when Nicole came in with a cup of tea, I studied her face and found no falsehood in it. A tired woman with shadows under her eyes, hard-worked hands, and lines that had not been there 13 years ago. "You're an idiot, Bernard," I thought. "You were given a chance to be a father again, and you're building suspicions." One afternoon, closer to spring, I was sitting with Kyle in his room. Nicole had gone to the pharmacy, and Gloria wasn't coming that day. I was reading him a book out loud, glancing at him now and then. At one point, light, quick footsteps sounded in the hallway. Nicole had come back. I instinctively turned toward the door, and then out of the corner of my eye, I caught how Kyle's face changed. Before that, his gaze had been unfocused, heavy. And then suddenly his eyes narrowed, sharpened, and he stared toward the door as if his whole body were bracing for something. A very strange expression for a child who supposedly barely reacted to anything going on around him. Nicole peeked in, smiled, said she'd be right back. Kyle didn't blink. His eyes were fixed on the spot where her figure had just been. I pushed the thought away and went back to reading. But somewhere at the edge of my mind, something flickered. He misses nothing. He sees everything. And maybe he understands more than we think. By spring, the house had started feeling almost too good. After months of hospitals, fear, and uncertainty, life had settled into a cozy rhythm. Nicole was always busy. Laughter filled the house. Gloria came regularly. Too smooth, too perfect. That's how it gets before major trouble hits. The first warning click came on the most ordinary day. Gloria came that morning. We exchanged a few words in the foyer. She went upstairs to Kyle, and I went to my office. About 2 hours later, I heard strange voices from downstairs. Nicole's tone was polite but firm. I had learned to recognize that back in her teenage years. Gloria's voice sounded confused. I went downstairs and saw them by the front door. Gloria was standing there with her bag, as if she had just been shown out. Nicole was holding an envelope in her hands. "Gloria, please understand," she was saying. "Dad has a ton of expenses right now. We need to tighten things somewhere. I can handle it." "Ms. Nicole," Gloria said quietly, "you were the one who wanted me working with Kyle. I wasn't just getting paid here. I thought your father was actually doing pretty well financially." I stepped in. "Gloria, what's going on?" Nicole turned around too quickly. "Dad, I was just about to tell you. I went over the expenses and we need to cut back." "Since when can't we afford a qualified caregiver?" "That's exactly why I think we need to be careful. You keep saying yourself that you're tired of the grind. It's time to start thinking about savings." There was logic in her words, but the situation rubbed me the wrong way. The decision had clearly come from Nicole, and her tone was the kind that says, everything has already been decided. Gloria looked at me, didn't argue, and took the envelope. On her way out, she paused and turned to me. "Mr. Harrison, if anything comes up, you have my number. If you feel like you need help, call me. Something felt off here today." Back then, I waved it off. Women's intuition, nothing more. Now I think I should have listened. That same evening, I needed to stop by my flagship hotel downtown, check on the progress of the restaurant renovation, talk to the manager. I got there a little early and walked through the lobby. And there, by the window, I saw them. Nicole was sitting in an armchair, leaning forward, saying something intensely to the man across from her. Around 40, in a good suit, holding a leather folder, with that particular way of carrying himself, I recognize instantly. A man used to negotiations. I recognized him a couple of seconds later. It was Stephen Cole, the family law attorney Nicole had consulted about the divorce. But Nicole had told me she was flying out to see him tomorrow, in another city. And there he was, sitting in my own hotel, and the two of them were talking like they had long since discussed everything. I stopped behind a large plant without drawing any attention to myself. Nicole smiled at him too warmly, laid her hand on his forearm. That is not how people behave with just attorneys. Then her face turned serious. She pulled out her phone and showed him something on the screen. He nodded and leaned closer. There was a sense of shared secrecy between them. I left as quietly as I had come in, went upstairs to the manager, and ran the meeting on autopilot. One image kept spinning in my head, Nicole, Stephen, her hand on his forearm. That evening at home, she acted as if nothing had happened. We talked about what time she needed to leave tomorrow. Before bed, she stopped in and asked, "Dad, do you need anything? Everything okay?" I looked at her face and tried to find the answer to one question. Why are you lying? But I didn't say it out loud. We had been through too much together, and this rebuilt trust had cost too much to throw accusations without solid proof. "Everything's fine," I said. "Just don't wear yourself out on the road." That night I couldn't sleep. My thoughts kept circling. Gloria's worried tone, the strange firing in the name of saving money, the meeting at the hotel, the gaps in my head, the episodes with the morning coffee. The more I tried to sort it all into neat categories, the more I felt a cold, sticky fear, not panic, but the quiet kind, when you simply understand the puzzle doesn't fit. Around midnight, I threw back the blanket, put on my robe, and stepped into the hallway. I walked past Kyle's room, even breathing, past the kitchen, everything in place, and I was already about to go back when my eyes caught on the garage door. I didn't even know why I was going there. My hand settled on the handle by itself, the door creaked softly, and I turned on the light. The garage was in order. 2 cars, shelves with boxes, tools. Everything familiar, if not for one thing. On the wall by the door leading into the house hung carbon monoxide detectors. I had installed them all over the house after an old incident with a neighbor. I walked up to the nearest one and pressed the test button. Usually there would be an obnoxious beep, a little light. This time, Silence. I pressed again. Nothing. I took the unit down, opened the battery compartment. Empty. I walked to the second one. Same thing. For the batteries to disappear from 2 detectors at once, someone had to take them out. I stood in the middle of the garage holding that plastic box and felt something inside me go very cold. 2 disabled carbon monoxide detectors in an enclosed space. That was no accident anymore. I slowly swept my eyes across the garage. And then my gaze caught on a strange detail at the back of Nicole's car. Near the exhaust pipe, a thick, flexible hose had been attached. One end at the exhaust, the other running under the car toward the area of the cabin air intakes. It looked as if someone had deliberately created a path for the exhaust fumes to flow back into the car instead of out into the air. Maybe some kind of setup to warm up the engine, I tried to reassure myself. I'll ask in the morning. But a chill was already crawling down my back. I turned off the light, went back into the house, and stood for a long time in the dark hallway, listening to my own breathing. Did I know then that I was already standing in the middle of a trap? No. I just felt that something was wrong, and I badly wanted to convince myself that it was only the imagination of an old man who had watched too many detective shows. In the morning, I woke up later than usual. Nicole was already getting ready, rustling in the hallway, the sound of a suitcase, quick footsteps. She peeked in. "Dad, I called a taxi for early this morning. I didn't want to wake you. There's everything you need in the fridge. I sorted your medications into the pill boxes. I wrote out Kyle's schedule. Gloria said she'd stop by one of these days." She leaned down and kissed the top of my head, the way she used to when she was little. "A couple of days and I'll be back," she added. "Don't rush," I said. "Kyle and I will manage." From the window, I watched her car pull out of the driveway and disappear around the corner. About 2 hours later, the phone rang. "Dad!" Nicole's voice sounded strangely tense. "Listen, I'm worried about the car. When I pulled out, it seemed like the engine was running kinda rough. Could you go down to the garage, start it up, listen to it? For a little longer, though. About 5 minutes, just to tell whether it was a one-time glitch or something steady." There was logic in what she said. I went downstairs, grabbed the keys, and walked into the garage. I turned the key. The engine started smoothly, quietly, no jerks, no strange sounds. I listened, and then noticed the air somehow getting heavier. There was a rushing in my temples. The air turned thick. In my chest came the feeling that I was breathing in, but not getting much out of it. I reached for the key, and suddenly my fingers wouldn't obey me. The edges of my vision darkened, the world narrowed into a tunnel, and in that moment, with terrifying clarity, the things from the night before came rushing back. The empty carbon monoxide detectors, the hose from the exhaust to the air intake, my daughter's request to listen to the engine for longer. I yanked the door handle and spilled outside, but immediately collapsed onto the concrete. My legs wouldn't hold me. I tried to get up, but my body had become foreign and heavy. I crawled toward the garage door, found the control button, pressed it. Once, twice, 3 times. Silence. The door didn't even twitch. I lifted my head and understood. There would be no more strength. The last thought that flashed through my darkening consciousness was my daughter's name. Then nothing. I came to because of cold and something rough against my cheek. Above me was a gray sky. Beneath my cheek, the damp concrete of the driveway. My lungs were greedily pulling in clean air, and over all of that, someone's voice. "Grandpa, can you hear me? Grandpa, wake up, please." I turned my head. Kyle was kneeling beside me, standing, not sitting in his wheelchair, standing, bracing his hands on my shoulders, shaking me, trying to bring me back. His face was pale, tears on his cheeks, but his eyes, those same dark, attentive eyes, were looking at me with startling clarity. Behind him, I saw the garage door half open. The car inside had been turned off. The hose from the exhaust pipe was lying off to the side. "You," I rasped. "You can walk." Kyle tightened his fingers. "I've been able to walk for a long time, Grandpa. I was never paralyzed. I was pretending." He helped me sit up, got me onto the step, and sat down beside me. "I didn't make it in time earlier," he said. "I knew Mom was planning something, but until the very end, I hoped she'd change her mind. Today I heard the car start, and I knew this was it." He swallowed. I opened the garage door from the outside. "We have an exterior lock, remember? Mom thought you'd never make it to it, and about me, she thought I couldn't even stand up." I sat there and felt something inside me turn over. Relief that I was alive, shock that my grandson could walk and talk, and the icy realization the attempt had been real. This was not my paranoia. "Grandpa," Kyle said quietly, "we need to talk. I should have told you everything a long time ago. I was just scared. But now there's no other way." We slowly went back into the house. In the living room, we sat across from each other, I in my armchair, he on the edge of the couch. He was no longer pretending to have a crooked neck, no longer letting his head flop to one side. He sat straight like a normal teenage boy, only a little hunched from everything he had just been through. "Grandpa, I know you're in shock," he began, "but you need to hear all of it." I nodded. "Start talking. From the very beginning." Kyle took a deep breath. His mother had forced him to pretend back there, before they came to me, when they were still living with his stepfather. At first, she had asked him to just play along, like his legs weren't working right. Then there had been one especially brutal beating. They ended up in the hospital at night, and for a few days, Kyle really couldn't get up, and she decided to push it all the way, to use it. She told him different stories about me, that I had forbidden her to get married, that because of me she had spent years enduring abuse, that I sat in a big house bathing in money and never cared about them. "I believed all of it for a long time," Kyle admitted. "To me, you were like some scary character from a story who could take everything away. And Mom was the only person I had. I agreed to sit in the chair and pretend I couldn't move. I thought we were just trying to survive." Every one of those sentences cut straight through me. So that was who I had been in my grandson's mind all these years. After moving in with me, he barely got up, not because he couldn't, but because he was afraid. Every night, Nicole whispered the same thing to him. "It's just you and me. Grandpa is dangerous. If you let it slip, he'll throw us out. I won't survive it, and you'll be left alone." But then Kyle started waking up at night because of her phone calls. Sometime in the fall, he started hearing fragments. "Insurance, death benefit, beneficiary. We'll set it up carefully so the old man doesn't suspect anything." "At first, I thought they were talking about my stepdad," he said. But then the words started coming together into a different picture, a much scarier one. One day, when Nicole went to take a shower and left her phone in the kitchen, he took the risk and scrolled through her messages. There were texts from Stephen Cole. Life insurance, a $25 million payout, the policy being taken out on me, beneficiaries, Nicole and Kyle. And she had written that, "The old man is soft. If you push the right way, he'll sign anything. First we need to make him helpless. With his age and medications, it'll all look natural." At night, Kyle heard other things too. Conversations about debts, online loans, threats. One time, in the middle of a conversation with Steven, she said, "There's no other way, Steve. I can't get out otherwise. I'm almost $300,000 in debt. You know the kind of people behind me." And then I overheard her calmly discussing exactly how to do it, Grandpa, he said in a whisper. They talked about carbon monoxide detectors, coffee, pills. They said it had to look like a natural death. That at your age, nobody would be surprised if something suddenly happened in the garage or while you were driving. I gripped the armrests of my chair. All that time, the boy had been carrying this alone. Kyle pulled a beat-up phone with a cracked screen out of his pocket. "I bought it with my allowance." I realized nobody would believe me just based on my word. I'm a kid, and Mom knows how to act. So I started recording everything I heard. He showed me a long list of audio files and photos of messages on the screen. One time, I heard her telling Stephen that the pills were working, but too slowly that the dose needed to go up, carefully, so the tests wouldn't show anything. And he was explaining about some anti-anxiety meds. In small doses, they fog your brain, and if you give a little every day, especially mixed with alcohol, at your age, it'll look like a normal decline into old age. I remembered the carefully made coffee every morning, sometimes with a little brandy, to get your blood moving. The blurring vision, the heavy thoughts. Dr. Reynolds spreading his hands. "The tests are clean." "Why didn't you come to me right away?" I asked, and my voice sounded harsher than I wanted it to. "At first I was scared," Kyle said honestly. "She drilled it into me that you had abandoned us, that you couldn't be trusted. Then I started thinking about how to make sure that even if she found out I told you, she wouldn't be able to twist everything around. So I kept collecting recordings. I wanted to wait for the moment when everything would be clear." "And when did you realize that moment had come?" "When I saw the batteries were gone from the detectors. I noticed before you did. I heard her messing around in the garage at night. Then in the morning I went down and pressed the button." Silence. That's when I knew for sure she was moving from words to action. But until the last second, I hoped she'd chicken out. And when she called today and asked you to go down to the garage, I knew that was the moment. He told me how he heard the engine running, climbed out of the chair, ran outside. He had had a key to the exterior garage lock hidden since the fall. He had taken one off his mother's keyring while she slept. I opened the garage and that smell hit me, sweet and heavy. You were lying on the floor, barely breathing. I dragged you the best I could. I'm not all that strong. But the whole time I kept thinking, please don't let it be too late. Grandpa, he finished, looking me straight in the eyes. I understand you might be angry at me for pretending and staying quiet while you were getting sicker. But I really didn't know what else to do. And now, if we don't tell everything, she'll either finish you next time or do something even worse. I stayed silent, just looking at him. In front of me sat a boy who had saved my life, and at the same time was admitting that for months he had been part of a performance against me because his mother told him to. I can't hate you, I finally said, and my voice trembled slightly. You just didn't have an adult beside you to say stop. Now you do. So we're going to do this the way adults do it. We're calling the police. The police? He asked quietly. The police, I confirmed. This is no longer a family scandal. This is attempted murder. Saying it turned out to be easier than doing it. My hand shook on the phone. Until the very end, some part of us still hopes it'll all somehow blow over. But I understood clearly. If I started trying to handle this quietly, it would end either with a funeral or with an even bigger nightmare. I dialed 911. The dispatcher transferred me to an investigator, a woman with a calm, firm voice who asked briefly, name, address, what happened. I told her everything as steadily as I could, without hysteria. The attempted carbon monoxide poisoning, the disabled detectors, the hose from the exhaust to the air intake, the suspicion of long-term poisoning through coffee, the existence of audio recordings and messages, the $25 million life insurance policy. On the other end, everything immediately became very businesslike. Stay home. Don't touch anything. Don't move the hose. Don't put the detectors back. Don't wash the coffee maker. I'm calling out a crime scene team and I'm heading to you myself. Senior Investigator, Lieutenant Colonel of Justice, Detective Sandra Mitchell. This call is being recorded. We'll be there in about half an hour. Open the door only to people in uniform. I'll show my ID first. I thanked her, hung up, and for a while just sat there catching my breath. "They're coming," I said to Kyle, "and both of us are going to have to tell it all again step by step. It's too late to be afraid now." Exactly half an hour later, we heard cars in the driveway. The doorbell rang, calm and steady. A woman around 40 stood on the porch, 2 uniformed officers behind her. She showed her badge. "Well, Mr. Harrison," she said as she walked into the house, "based on what you've told me, this is not a family fight. This is a textbook attempt. The more carefully we collect everything right now, the less chance the guilty ones will have to say it was all misunderstood." First, we went to the garage. Detective Mitchell carefully examined the hose and the detectors, photographed every corner, and gave instructions to the crime scene tech. "Batteries do die sometimes," she said calmly, holding one of the empty detectors in gloved hands. "But for 2 of them to be emptied at the same time, that neatly removed and not replaced, that takes human hands. The hose is secured firmly. This wasn't random. That alone is already a serious charge." Then we sat down in the living room. I was in my armchair, Kyle beside me. Mitchell took out a notebook and turned on a recorder. "Tell me everything from the beginning. How your daughter came back, how she behaved, when your symptoms started, how Kyle pretended, how he found out about the plans, what recordings he made. We're not going to rush." And so my grandson and I, one after the other, began to talk. I told her about Nicole's call after years of silence, about her repentance, about Kyle in the wheelchair, about how she took over the household and my paperwork, about the exams with Dr. Reynolds, the morning coffee, the strange lapses, Gloria being fired, the meeting with the lawyer at the hotel, my nighttime trip to the garage. Kyle told her about the conversations he heard at night, about the debts, the insurance policy, the words, "We need to make the old man helpless," about the recordings on the old phone. When Kyle handed her the phone, Mitchell carefully placed it on a clean sheet of paper. "This is a very important item. From this moment on, do not touch it with your hands. If there are threats on there, discussions of amounts and methods, that's concrete." She asked for one file to be opened. Nicole's voice filled the room. Familiar, my own daughter's voice, and yet somehow completely foreign. "If everything is done carefully, nobody will dig into it. He's old, he already has health problems. Carbon monoxide is a classic. The detectors are gone, the insurance people won't dig too hard. We'll say his heart gave out." Then a man's voice. Stephen Cole. "The main thing is not to rush. First, we get him into a state with the pills where he's sluggish and forgetful, so the doctors get used to that picture. So that later, when the accident happens, nobody is surprised." A wave of nausea hit me, not from gas, but from the realization. These were real conversations between living people, and one of them was my daughter. Mitchell turned the recording off. "That's enough to open a case for attempted murder. From here, financial records, insurance documents, medical charts, statements from the doctors and the caregiver. If there's anyone who can bring documents related to the household and business, call them." I remembered Roman, my longtime manager who knew all the paperwork. I called him briefly without details. I needed help, bring the folders with my insurance policies and the documents signed over the last few months. He said he'd be there within an hour. In the meantime, Mitchell called Gloria. From the sound of her voice, she wasn't especially surprised. "Honestly, I was afraid it was something like this. The day she fired me, I got chills from that woman. If you need me, I'll come and tell you everything I saw." When Roman arrived, he brought a briefcase and pulled out a folder. "Here's the policy that, according to Nicole, you were taking out just to have things in order. I was surprised by the amount, but she explained that it would make everyone feel more secure. I'm sorry I didn't insist that you review it yourself." We spread the papers across the table. The policy clearly stated in black and white, in the event of the insured person's death, pay the sole beneficiary, daughter Nicole, the insurance amount of $25 million. Mitchell photographed the document and attached it to the report. So, at this point, we have attempted murder using carbon monoxide, technically confirmed, audio recordings discussing the method, the timing, and the motive, a recently issued insurance policy for a large sum in favor of that same daughter. That is more than enough to open a criminal case for attempted murder for financial gain, committed by a group of persons acting in conspiracy. I listened to those dry words and understood they were about my own blood. What now? She's in another city right now. She'll be back in a couple of days. Mitchell thoughtfully turned her pen in her fingers. Most likely she doesn't even suspect that you're alive. The plan was simple. You die quietly in the garage, she comes back, discovers the body, everybody sympathizes, the insurance company pays out. If we make noise right now, she'll realize the plan failed and go on the run. With the attorney. We need them to come in on their own. To something already prepared. And how exactly are you planning to do that? You're going to act like nothing happened. She'll call today or tomorrow to check whether everything went according to plan. You'll tell her you felt a little off, but nothing unusual. We'll put the house under surveillance and pull her movement data. The moment she comes back, we'll be ready. She paused, then added, besides, she may not give up on a backup plan, pills or something with the car. That gives us a chance to catch her in the act. Are you ready for that, Mr. Harrison? I looked at Kyle. He was sitting there drawn in on himself, but in his eyes was the same thing I felt in me. Exhaustion from constant fear and the desire to finally end it. If that's the only way to keep her from slipping away, I said, then we'll play along. I'm tired of living in a fog. Let the truth come out onto the table for once. Mitchell nodded and stood up. Before leaving, she shook my hand, unexpectedly firmly, like a human being, not just a detective. Then she turned to Kyle. You did something not every adult could have done. You saved your grandfather's life and brought us evidence. You did the right thing. When they left, the house filled with a tense silence. Not the everyday kind, but the kind that comes in the pause before the main act. The phone lay on the table, but it felt like it was pulsing in time with my heart. Somewhere out there, in another city, Nicole was living in the certainty that her father was already dead. Somewhere out there, Stephen Cole was making plans for how to split the insurance payout. And here I sat with the grandson who had saved my life, waiting for her to call. The phone rang closer to lunchtime. Nicole's name lit up on the screen. I felt everything inside me tighten. Hello? I answered, making my voice sound as weak as I could. Dad. My daughter's voice was soft, almost tender. How are you? I've been beside myself all morning, thinking about you. I'm fine, I coughed, making my voice sound tired, a little confused. Well, mostly. I got hit with something for a bit, my head started buzzing, so I had to lie down. But I rested, and it passed. There was a short pause on the other end. Did you go down to the garage? Did you start the car? Yeah, I grumbled. Like you asked. Started it, listened. The engine runs smooth. Felt a little worse, opened the door, got some air, went back upstairs. I'm old. I heard her exhale. Not with relief, but with irritation, carefully hidden. Dad, you're scaring me. When I get back, I'm making you an appointment with Dr. Reynolds right away. We need to take your condition seriously. Go ahead, I agreed. Wouldn't hurt. Then she switched into her usual mode. The hotel, the meeting, divorce paperwork, traffic. I listened with half an ear, because all I could see in my mind was the hose in the garage and hear her voice on the recording. Is Kyle there? Can I talk to him? I looked at my grandson. He was already sitting in the wheelchair, his arms tucked in, his head tilted slightly, back in character. Mitchell and I had decided that until the moment of the arrest, he would keep moving around the house in the chair. I turned on speakerphone. Mom, Kyle said in a quiet, sluggish voice. Grandpa's reading me a book. We're waiting for you." There was so much fake tenderness in Nicole's voice that it made my skin crawl. We said goodbye. I put the phone down and felt my fingers trembling slightly. Not from weakness, but from tension. We had had to do too much acting in just a few minutes. A text came in from Mitchell. "That went well. From her tone, she still doesn't suspect anything. We're checking her flight." 2 hours later came another message. Nicole had bought a ticket for an evening flight. Arrival late at night. The house was already under tight outside surveillance. "Did you see that, Grandpa?" Kyle looked out the window. "The curtain in the neighbor's house across the street moved weird. Is that them?" "It is," I nodded. "Better the curtain moves than the fog in my head." The evening dragged on forever. Kyle sat in the wheelchair, officially paralyzed, though under the blanket his foot twitched now and then. I walked from room to room, pretending to be a slightly confused old man. Closer to midnight, headlights slashed across the yard. A car door slammed, then the front door opened. "Dad!" Nicole's voice sounded brightly cheerful, too cheerful. I came out of the living room, holding onto the wall, shuffling a little, and partly not acting because the day had been hard. She rushed to me and hugged me. "My God, you're so pale. Do you ever take care of yourself at all?" Her hands were warm, her eyes loving. If I hadn't known those same hands had fastened the hose to the exhaust pipe, I probably would have melted. "Come on, I'm still alive," I smiled. She checked on Kyle, kissed him on the forehead, adjusted his blanket, then pushed me off to bed and brought me tea. "Tomorrow morning I'll make you real coffee," she said with concern. "You're not human without it." Something heavy flashed in her eyes and disappeared just as quickly behind her usual bustle. That night, I barely slept, listening to every sound. A couple of times, quiet footsteps shuffled through the hallway, one of Mitchell's people checking the perimeter. In the morning, I woke up to the familiar smell of fresh coffee. Nicole came in carrying a tray, a cup, a little glass of brandy, for energy, a sandwich. "Good morning, Dad. How did you sleep?" "So-so," I answered honestly. "My head's buzzing." "Then all the more reason to treat it." She slid the cup closer. "Drink it while it's hot." I took the cup and pretended to bring it to my lips. While out of the corner of my eye, I noticed how carefully she was watching every movement. "It's hot," I said. "I'll set it down for now. Let it cool." She grimaced slightly, but pulled herself together. "Okay, I'm going to make Kyle some oatmeal." The moment she left, I walked over to the ficus by the window and carefully poured the contents of the cup into the soil. Poor plant. During the day, Nicole bustled around the house, went outside several times, whispered on the phone, and at one point drove off, said she needed to pick up papers from the lawyer. I saw 2 unremarkable cars keeping their distance behind her. That evening, Kyle came to me with a pale face. "Grandpa, she didn't drive out last night for nothing. I put a tiny recorder in her car, but remember, Mitchell and I talked about it." Before Nicole had gotten back, they had delivered a small device which Kyle, knowing his mother's habits, had attached under the dashboard. We turned on the recording. For a while, there was only the sound of the engine, the hiss of the tires. Then a car door slammed, and voices started. "So how much longer is this thing going to keep dragging on?" Stephen Cole's voice, with a slight accent. "You said everything would go smooth." "I don't get it myself," Nicole answered irritably. "After all these months, the pills should have finished him off, but he's still hanging on. Today he actually made it out of the garage." "Even though in theory, he should have stayed there," Stephen muttered with a dry laugh. "You were the one talking about the road option. You've got Dr. Reynolds, right? The old man drives to the doctor, and on the way back you increase the dose. 1 ditch, 1 extra pill, and that's it." "I already made him an appointment," Nicole answered calmly. "Monday morning. He'll already be weak first thing, and after the pill behind the wheel, He'll be completely gone. Nobody on the highway is going to dig into it. Age, fainting spell, heart. And insurance is insurance. They talked a little more about money and plans, how after the sad event she would sell off part of the assets and finally start living right. Every word she said carried absolute confidence that she would get away with it. When the recording ended, silence settled over the room. "Monday," I said out loud. Kyle looked at me as if he were afraid I would let it slide again. "We're calling Mitchell, right now." Mitchell answered almost immediately. I put her on speaker and let her hear the full recording. "The plan is confirmed," she said. "Monday morning, doctor's appointment, attempt to stage a crash on the way back. That works in our favor. We'll have time to coordinate everything with Dr. Reynolds and arrange an escort. You'll go with her to the doctor like usual, weak, forgetful, trusting your daughter. Inside, you're with us. Before the appointment, one of our people will intercept you. The rest is our concern." "Well, if we've started this," I sighed, "we have to go all the way." The night from Sunday to Monday was probably the longest of my life. Nicole moved around the house looking like a devoted daughter, checking on me now and then. "Dad, don't worry. Dr. Reynolds and I will go over everything, do new tests. Everything will be fine." Fine for whom? I wanted to ask, but I only nodded tiredly. Kyle offered to go with us, but Mitchell and I decided that was too much risk. He stayed home under the watch of the team. In the morning, Nicole and I drove to the medical center. She was behind the wheel, I sat in the passenger seat, the perfect patient. I watched her hands on the steering wheel, well kept, with a neat manicure, and somehow that made it hurt even more. "Dad, why are you so gloomy? We'll figure everything out now. Reynolds will take a look. Maybe it's just your blood pressure bouncing around." "Age," I agreed. At a certain age, sooner or later something kicks in for everybody. At the entrance to the center, an administrator was already waiting for us. A face I didn't know, eyes too attentive, too calm a reaction to Nicole. Clearly one of Mitchell's people. We sat in the hallway. Nicole held me by the elbow, stroked my hand now and then, playing her role down to the smallest detail. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like the whole floor could hear it. The office door cracked open, and Dr. Reynolds appeared. A little tenser than usual, but outwardly the same calm doctor. "Mr. Harrison, come in. And you too, Nicole. Let's talk together." I stood up, swayed a little. Nicole immediately caught my arm. We walked in. The door closed softly behind us. Reynolds gave me the faintest nod, pointed with his eyes toward the corner. And only then did I see Mitchell standing by the wall in a dark jacket. No uniform, but one look in her eyes told me that a completely different scene was about to begin. For appearance's sake, Reynolds flipped through my chart, asked formal questions about blood pressure and sleep. Nicole sat beside me, her hand resting heavily on my shoulder. Then Reynolds let out a quiet sigh, closed the chart, looked up, and said in a completely different tone, "Nicole, now let's talk not as a doctor with relatives, but as people who have something to say to each other." And he slightly turned his head toward the corner. Only then did Nicole notice Mitchell. She flinched. Her fingers tightened on my shoulder. "Who is that? A new specialist?" Mitchell calmly stepped out of the shadows and pulled out her badge. "Senior Investigator Detective Mitchell, Investigative Division. Criminal case involving attempted murder of a close family member for financial gain, committed by a group acting in prior conspiracy, as well as fraud-related counts and attempted insurance fraud." At first, Nicole didn't understand. She just sat there, mouth slightly open, her eyes darting from Mitchell to Reynolds to me. "This is some kind of joke. Dad, what's going on?" "This is not a joke," Mitchell said, placing the detention order in front of her. Nicole shot to her feet so fast the chair screeched. "Dad, you don't actually believe all this garbage, do you? Tell them this is a mistake." I stood up slowly, feeling everything inside me buzzing. "Nicole," I said quietly, "they wouldn't be here for nothing." At that moment, the door opened, and two solidly built men in plain jackets walked in. "We're carrying out the detention here," Mitchell said with a nod toward them. "You have no right," Nicole screamed. "I didn't do anything. Dad, tell them. Tell them you love me." Her voice cracked on the high note, the first real sound, not theatrical. Mitchell recited clearly, from memory. "You are being detained on suspicion of committing a serious crime. You have the right not to testify against yourself, the right to an attorney, the right to one phone call after processing. Anything you say may be used as evidence. Dad, tell them." One of the officers gently but firmly took her by the arm, and the other pulled out handcuffs. "This is all because of Kyle. He fed you some story. That little brat." She cut herself off when she saw how I reacted to the word brat. "Kyle saved my life," I said calmly. "And you tried to take it." For 1 second, something real flashed in her eyes. Angry, wounded, almost childlike, not meant for anyone's benefit. More frightening than any screaming, because what was in that look was, "How dare you not be convenient?" Then the handcuffs clicked shut, and suddenly she sagged, lowered her head. "Dad," she said now in a quiet, hoarse voice, "I just wanted for once in my life to get lucky. You controlled everything your whole life, me too." "Your motives will be examined," Mitchell cut in, "but that does not change the fact that you were preparing a murder. From here on, discuss it with your attorney." At the door, Nicole turned around, eye to eye. "You'll regret this. Without me, you're nothing. That boy will be the first one to leave you the second he grows up." "That is no longer for you to decide," Mitchell answered calmly. "Let's go." The door closed. The sound echoed somewhere under my ribs like a hollow blow. I sat back down, and only then realized how badly I had been shaking the whole time. My hands, my legs, my chin. "Water?" Reynolds asked simply. "Wouldn't hurt," I managed. Then came reports, signatures, a short conversation with Mitchell in the hallway. "She's being held pending trial. We have enough recordings, documents, and testimony to break apart any denial." She paused. "I understand that for you this isn't a victory. It's a loss. But it would have been much worse if we had arrived a day later." At home, Kyle was waiting for us. He couldn't hold back. He ran into the foyer, but at the last second caught himself, rolled the wheelchair a few feet, and only when he saw it was us stood up. "Well?" he asked. From Mitchell's face, everything was already clear. "Your mother was arrested," I said directly. "Officially. From here on, everything goes through the law." He froze, then slowly lowered himself into the chair and covered his face with his hands. Mitchell quietly placed her palm on his shoulder. "You did everything you could. The rest is our job." Then came the months that I remember as one long, blurred strip of offices, papers, interrogations, and confrontations. Everything was confirmed. The debts of nearly $300,000 backed by notes, the online casinos, the messages with Stephen Cole where they calculated the insurance payout, the internet searches, how carbon monoxide works, and how to clear benzodiazepines from the blood, the insurance scheme, the messages with potential buyers of the hotel business. The investigation moved carefully but relentlessly. Sometimes I caught myself feeling a strange relief. I wasn't the only one carrying all this filth inside anymore. Now it was laid out in folders, under charges, in case volumes. A few months later, the case went to trial. The prosecutor, a short man with a dry face and very attentive eyes, came to us ahead of time. "The defense will try to turn this into a family conflict," he warned. "They'll talk about your supposed excessive demands, Nicole's desperation, how the attorney manipulated her. But we have enough documents and recordings to show that this was a cold, calculated plan." I remember the day of the trial in detail. The high-ceilinged courtroom, the benches, the smell of varnish and paper. The judge, a stern woman with a tired face. When the bailiffs brought in Nicole and Stephen Cole, the room was buzzing. Among the familiar faces were Kyle and Roman, who had come to support me, and Gloria, sitting quietly in the corner. Nicole had lost weight, gone gray, but she held her chin high. When she saw me, she froze for a second, then turned away, as if her pride would not let her ask for anything with her eyes. The trial lasted several days. Experts explained what substance had been found in my tests and how long it had been building up, and that the carbon monoxide traces on the garage walls could not have come from a random engine start. Insurance representatives explained who had initiated the policy. Gloria testified about how Nicole always poured my coffee herself, pushing her aside, how suddenly she was fired, how the woman gave her chills. Nicole's ex-husband testified too. Eric Dalton, the same man she had left with all those years ago. Time had not been kind to him. Gray hair, wrinkles, the posture of someone permanently worn down. She used to say all the time, "It's fine. Her father will die someday anyway, and everything will be mine." Back then, I thought it was just something cruel, she said. The defense tried to paint Stephen as the main villain, a man who took advantage of a vulnerable woman, but every attempt like that crashed against Kyle's recordings. Nicole was the one insisting. Nicole was the one inventing the details. Nicole was the one delighted when I signed the policy. Nicole was the one laying out the timeline. When they called me to the stand, I walked there feeling somehow like a stranger to myself. The same suit, the same voice, but inside a kind of exhaustion so deep, it felt as if I had lived an extra 10 years. "Tell the court how all of this affected your life," the judge said. "Almost a year ago," I began, "I was sure I had been given a second chance. My daughter, whom I hadn't spoken to in years, came back to me and brought the grandson I had never seen. I thought it was a gift, a chance to fix something. It turned out that by that moment the sentence had already been signed, just not for her, for me. I told them how I had trusted her, how I had handed over part of the business, how every morning I drank coffee from her hands and took it for care, how I lay on the garage floor, feeling consciousness slipping away, how I thought, this is where I'm going to stay, and how it was a boy I believed to be gravely ill who pulled me out. The hardest part, I said, isn't even that she wanted to kill me. The hardest part is that she used my grandson. She made him pretend, told him what a monster I was. And when that boy, despite everything, chose truth over fear, I realized that I do have a family, just not the one I had imagined for myself. I felt my throat tighten and paused. I do not wish my daughter harm. She is still my blood, and it hurts me to look at her. But I asked the court to give her a sentence that would send a clear message. Even against the people closest to you, things like this do not go without consequences. The judge thanked me and told me I could sit down, but I stayed standing. When Kyle was called, it mattered to me to be near him, if only with my eyes. He stepped up to the stand in a button-down shirt and dark slacks like an adult, only his hands were shaking. "Please state your name," the judge said gently. He gave his name. "Tell us what stayed with you the most." "Mom told me Grandpa abandoned us, that he was bad, that he didn't love us. I thought that for a long time. And when we moved here, she said I needed to play a little role, so Grandpa would understand how bad things were for us and wouldn't throw us out. I believed we were surviving, that everything was for that." He spoke calmly, stopping now and then to catch his breath, about the late-night conversations through the door, about the phone, about the recordings, about dragging me out of the garage. "I still love my mom," he said quietly near the end, and the courtroom went completely silent. But what she was doing was wrong, and if I had stayed quiet, she would have killed Grandpa. I'm scared that she's in prison, but I would be even more scared if she were walking the streets pretending nothing had happened. The judge thanked him. As Kyle was walking back to his seat, I saw Nicole in the glass defendant's box clench her fists so hard her knuckles turned white, but she couldn't bring herself to lift her eyes. Then came closing arguments. The prosecutor calmly laid everything out piece by piece: motive, preparation, actions. The defense made one last play for sympathy. A lonely woman, a hard life, debt, she snapped, but didn't go through with it. To which the prosecutor quietly replied, "She did not abandon her plans. She was stopped by outside intervention." If not for the actions of a child and law enforcement, we would not be discussing attempted murder, but a completed killing. Finally, the day of sentencing came. The courtroom was almost the same, only the air felt heavier. The judge spent a long time listing the established facts, the legal classification, the charges. I sat gripping the edge of the bench, Kyle beside me, Mitchell just behind us, like a shadow that had become part of our background. "The court finds it necessary to sentence Nicole Elizabeth Harrison to 20 years of imprisonment," the judge said. The words 20 years landed like a blow. Someone in the courtroom gasped softly, and Kyle let out a shaky breath beside me. For a woman her age, that was almost the rest of her life. "Stephen Cole," the judge continued, "for participation in preparing the crime and aiding insurance fraud. 15 years in a maximum security correctional facility." She said something more about time served and the right to appeal, but I heard it all as if through water. Nicole stood in the defendant's box, white as a sheet, her fingers digging into the edge of the bench. Her eyes darted around the courtroom until they landed on me. "Are you happy now?" she mouthed soundlessly. I stepped a little closer. "What I achieved," I said quietly, "is that you can no longer do to me and Kyle what you tried to do. Everything else is on your conscience." She flinched as if I had slapped her, turned away, and for the first time through all of it, she cried for real. Not theatrically, but heavily, silently, her shoulders shaking. The deputies opened the box, put handcuffs on her, and led her into the hallway. She never looked back again. Kyle and I left through a side entrance to avoid the cameras. Mitchell caught up with us on the courthouse steps. "Officially, my job is done," she said. "But if you need me, you know where to find me." I thanked her, unable to find the right words. Everything I wanted to say was too big for any thank you. We walked down into the square. The city greeted us with a soft drizzle. "Grandpa," Kyle asked quietly when we reached the car, "is it really over now?" I looked at the courthouse building, at the wet pavement. "With the case itself, yes. But what's inside us, we'll be dealing with that for a long time. Still, the worst part is behind us." He nodded and took my arm, like an adult, even though he was still very much a child. About a year passed after the sentencing. One morning, I caught myself realizing that I was sitting in the kitchen, not in that huge, echoing house anymore, but in an ordinary, bright little kitchen in a 2-story home in a quiet neighborhood. And instead of that heavy silence all around me, there was only rain outside the window and the sound of Kyle's laptop from the next room. He had grown, stretched out, his voice had gotten rougher, and he had traded his glasses for some stylish new pair. Picked them out himself. He sat there finishing his oatmeal while building something on the screen for his robotics club. And when I asked, "Are you sure you're not going to be late for school?" he answered in that same old way, "Don't worry, I'll make it." I make my own coffee now, strong, no sugar, in an old little pot. And every time I pour that thick black liquid, I catch myself thanking fate. There is nothing in that mug anymore except coffee. A small chill runs down my back from the memory, but it doesn't paralyze me anymore. It just reminds me. It happened, we got through it, we learned from it. In the end, I sold the large hotel holding company for honest money, more than enough for a peaceful old age for me and a decent future for Kyle. I invested part of it in safe instruments, and the rest, at Kyle's own suggestion, we put into a foundation. I dug in my heels and suggested we call it something simpler, but he insisted, let people know who's behind it. The foundation turned into something real, not performative. We help children who have been through domestic abuse. We pay for therapists, lawyers, rent a place for some, buy clothes and school books for others, sometimes even tickets to another city if a child has to be pulled out fast from a place where they're being broken. When Roman or Mitchell sends over an update, this girl was placed with a foster family, this boy got into college, I think, maybe this is how I turn at least some small part of that horror from pure pain into action. The foundation board ended up almost like family. Roman handles finances and contracts. Gloria makes sure the help actually reaches people. Mitchell advises on legal matters. And Dr. Reynolds unexpectedly became one of the strongest supporters of free psychological help for children who survived abuse. Kyle changed more in that 1 year than in all the years before combined. At first, he tried to carry everything on himself, managing my medications, the bills, the schedules. Until the therapist Mitchell connected us with sat both of us down on a couch and said quietly but firmly, "The role of adult is already taken. That's Mr. Harrison. And you, Kyle, are not forbidden from being a child who has lived through a lot of hard things, but who still has the right to play, get angry, make mistakes, and ask for help." At first, I went to her myself like it was some unpleasant required checkup. But then I caught myself realizing that it was there for the first time that I was able to say out loud, "My daughter tried to kill me," and not get stuck halfway through, but simply say it and hear back not pity, not judgment, but a professional answer. "That is horrible, but you survived. Let's figure out how to live with it from here." In the evenings, Kyle sometimes comes back from her office thoughtful, quiet, and then suddenly says something like, "You know, Grandpa, apparently I don't have to choose between Mom and you. I can love her as the person who gave me life, and at the same time not agree with what she did." Months earlier, before I sold the last hotel, a letter arrived. A neat envelope with an official stamp, and inside, a sheet of lined paper covered in Nicole's familiar, slightly sweeping handwriting. My hands shook more than they had that day in the garage. She justified herself a lot, remembered a lot, asked for forgiveness, and at the same time argued with the sentence. But between the lines, the main thing was there. "I understand what I did. I see how much pain I brought you and Kyle. I'm not asking you to excuse me, but I want you to know that I really did love you in my own way." I folded the letter and put it in the bottom drawer of my desk, where the old photographs and marriage certificate are kept. Sometimes in the evenings when Kyle is asleep, I take it out and read it again, and every time I feel two different men fighting inside me. One wants to tear the page to pieces and throw it away. The other carefully smooths out the folds and thinks, maybe someday, when Kyle and I are standing more firmly on our feet, we could go to a visitation, look her in the eye, and say everything that has built up. Not to get the past back, but to step out of it for good. The adoption was its own story. At first, I was afraid to even think about it. After all, I'm not that age anymore, and formally he was my grandson, not my son. But the attorney explained that it mattered to secure his position legally, so that no one, including Nicole after she gets out someday, could shake the situation loose. The hearing didn't last long. The judge, a woman with kind eyes, asked Kyle, "Do you understand that now Mr. Harrison will officially be not just your grandfather, but your father?" "He already takes responsibility for me," Kyle answered without hesitation. "The paperwork is just catching up to what's already true." The judge smiled and issued the order. When we stepped outside with that document in our hands, for the first time in a very long while, I felt not only exhaustion, but something like a quiet joy. Daily life became simple, almost boring, and there was so much happiness in that boredom that sometimes I surprised myself. In the mornings, each of us goes about his own business. Kyle to school and club activities, me to the foundation or for a walk in the park, where I can just walk peacefully and not expect some new disaster to jump out from around the corner. In the evenings, we cook together. He teaches me how to make pasta the right way, scolds me when I overcook everything again, laughs when half the contents of the skillet somehow end up on my shirt. Then we sit down in front of the TV and pick some old movie. No superheroes, no explosions. In that 1 year, we both got our fill of real adrenaline. Simple stories are enough for us now, the kind where people are just trying not to betray each other. One evening, Kyle asked, "Grandpa, if back then you had decided not to testify and had just thrown Mom out of the house, would she be locked up now?" "Most likely not," I answered honestly. "She would have gone quiet for a while, then come up with another way, and after that, there's no telling how it would have ended." "So what you did, that wasn't revenge?" He looked at me intently. He didn't need a pretty phrase. He needed the truth. "It was protection," I said. "First of all of you, second of all of myself. And as strange as it sounds, somewhere deep down, of her too. Because when a person starts down a road like that and nobody stops them, sooner or later they reach a point of no return." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "You know, I think that's what real strength is. Not in defeating everyone and getting revenge on everyone, but in stopping evil even when it comes into your home wearing the face of someone you love and still not becoming the same thing yourself." We talked a lot about trust. For a long time, I couldn't react calmly to someone pouring me tea. I would catch myself checking pill bottles, counting change. One day, Kyle noticed me quietly pouring the rest of some fruit punch down the sink after a visitor left and said, "Grandpa, being afraid is normal. But don't turn fear into the only lens you use. Otherwise, it'll turn out that Mom didn't just try to kill you. She also took away your ability to trust anyone at all after that." I remember thinking then that maybe we shouldn't be paying the therapist. Maybe he should be paying us for a conversation partner like that. But out loud, all I said was, "I'll keep learning, son. To trust carefully, but still trust." So here we are tonight, sitting on our old couch. He has a mug of tea, there's a warm blanket over his legs, a black and white movie is playing on TV, and outside, as usual, rain is falling softly. Somewhere far off, a commuter train hums past, and I understand this. Life did not turn into a perfect fairy tale. The world is still full of people who lie to and use each other, and somewhere far away, my daughter is still serving her sentence. But in this little space between these four walls, there is no lie right now. No fear, no thought that someone behind your back is preparing your death. And that feeling is worth more than any money and any empire. Looking back, it's easy to say that I should have noticed sooner, listened to Gloria, listened to Kyle, listened to my own body that had been screaming something was being done to it that should not have been. But when a person wants to see love and care, he is very reluctant to let thoughts of betrayal in. So the main conclusion I came to is this: trust is priceless, but it does not cancel caution. And if something deep inside you flinches, don't smother it with words like, "I'm probably imagining it." At least take a closer look. People sometimes ask me whether I regret standing against my own daughter. And every time I give the same answer, I regret that at some point she chose money over people. I regret that I lost my child back when she first slammed the door and left. But I do not regret for 1 minute that I protected myself and Kyle, because if I hadn't, I would already be gone. And he might have spent his whole life thinking that his mother's will had turned out to be stronger than his conscience. Closing your eyes to danger, just because it is terrifying to admit the truth, is far more dangerous than facing it head-on once. And everything else comes down to choice, to who we consider family, by blood or by deeds, and to whether, after surviving betrayal, we are still able to leave room inside ourselves for at least one person we can trust again, not blindly, but truly. Because without that, life stops being protection and turns into a prison, no matter how strong the door of your own house may seem.